She sat alone in seat 9, a hood up, hair tangled, clutching a faded canvas bag with both hands like it was shielding something sacred. The lights above flickered as the jet hit a heavy patch of turbulence, casting brief flashes across the cabin. Passengers jolted, gasps rising, fingers gripping armrests and tray tables. Rachel didn't move. Her eyes scanned the ceiling quietly, lips barely parted as if measuring something no one else could see. "Is the pressure dropping?" she asked calmly, voice low, directed at the passing flight attendant. Cindy, the attendant, forced a polite smile. "Please, stay seated, ma'am. The professionals are handling it." A smirk spread across the face of a guy in a bright tracksuit beside her. "She thinks she's flying the damn plane," he muttered. Laughter echoed, but Rachel's fingers tightened around the bag. The captain's voice crackled over the intercombo. It wasn't normal. "Protocol. Night Viper 9. If you can hear this. The cockpit is waiting." The plane shook again, harder this time, like it had been yanked from below. Rachel didn't flinch, but something changed. Not in her posture, but in the air around her. Asterisk. The turbulence hadn't just rattled the plane, it had awakened something. Cindy moved quickly down the aisle, her blonde curls bouncing, her cheerful facade now fraying under real worry. Oxygen masks hadn't dropped yet, but the tension in the cabin was its own kind of suffocation. The sky outside had turned into a churning mess, gray, slashed with black, clouds heaving like waves. Passengers were growing restless. The guy next to Rachel turned. "Seriously? What was that?" "Night Viper. Some kind of code." His friend, slicked hair and gold chain, leaned over the aisle with a laugh. "Maybe she's CIA or something. Gonna open a hatch and jump out." A suited woman from 2 rows back leaned in, her tone sharp. "Miss, we paid for peace of mind, not to watch. You auditioned for a Marvel reboot." More laughter. Rachel didn't react, just adjusted her glasses, slow and deliberate, like each motion was calibrated. Then the lights dimmed again. A shudder passed under the plane like a growl from deep below. From across the aisle, a woman in a bright pink cardigan chimed in with a voice soaked in passive aggression. "Honey, just sit tight. We've got trained pilots up there. No one needs a wannabe savior in row 9. Rachel blinked slowly. "Once, I'm not trying to save anyone," she said. "I'm trying to make sure we land." Her voice was level, calm, unyielding, but she wasn't performing. She didn't care if they believed her. Cindy returned, this time without a smile. "Ma'am," she said, "I'm going to ask you not to spread fear. You're making people nervous." Rachel didn't look at her. "I'm not the one shaking." The plane, the air froze. A father in a polo shirt stood suddenly. "Enough," he snapped, jabbing a finger. "You're upsetting people. My kid's crying. If you've got something to say, go say it to the pilots." A few murmurs of agreement. Rachel turned to the window, her hand tracing the frayed edge of the bag in her lap. The light outside cast a sheen across her glasses. Thunder rumbled in the distance. The overhead intercom clicked, then a voice nod. Cindy's, not the captain's. It was a man's voice, tight, trembling with urgency. "This is the co-pilot. If there's anyone on board with formal navigation, training, military, aviation, anything, please, come forward. We're requesting assistance. Repeat, we need support in the cockpit." The cabin went dead quiet. Rachel closed the notebook on her lap. Dawn stood. Rachel rose slowly, slinging her worn canvas bag over one shoulder, her expression unreadable. A few passengers stared in disbelief. Others whispered in disbelief and discomfort. "Sit down," barked the man in the polo shirt. "This isn't a movie. You don't just walk into the cockpit like that." Rachel walked past him without a word. "Are you kidding me?" said the woman in the pink cardigan, now nearly out of her seat. "What? Do we just let anyone who feels qualified start flipping switches now?" The diamond earring woman raised her phone and started recording. "This is going to go viral," she muttered. Crazy woman in seat 9A, hijacks plane with a book bag and attitude. Rachel paused at the aisle, turning her head slightly, eyes catching the camera lens. I hope it does, she said. Then maybe next time, someone like me won't get ignored until it's too late. A ripple of unease passed through the cabin. Cindy stepped forward to intercept her. But before she could speak, the cockpit door clicked open. The co-pilot, tall and pale, stepped out, eyes searching the crowd. Was it you who asked about pressure levels earlier? He asked. Rachel nodded. Do you have training? He asked, doubt in his voice. I know what drift looks like. You're off by 4 degrees, she answered quietly. The co-pilot stiffened. Come with me. No way, tracksuit guy called out. She's not even crew. She's probably just playing flight simulator at home. But Rachel kept walking. The executive in the expensive suit stood to block her path. This is insanity, he hissed. She doesn't look qualified. This is a security breach. Rachel didn't flinch. You just lost 2 minutes. That's long enough to lose a wing. He froze. She stepped past him, brushing against his designer sleeve, and disappeared into the cockpit. Inside, the air was different, tense, hot. A low alarm beeped softly. The pilot's face was drenched in sweat, his jaw clenched so hard it looked like it might snap. He turned to see her, his eyes widened. No, Night Viper 9, he whispered. Rachel nodded once. That designation was retired after the organ incident. There's no time, she said, already moving. She sat in the co-pilot's seat and reached for the auxiliary controls like she'd never left them. Her hands were fast, but graceful, flipping switches, realigning calibration, adjusting pitch. You're feeding false readings, she said. The altimeter's being tricked by wind distortion. We're 800 feet higher than you think. The pilot's eyes snapped to the screen. My God, she's right. A harsh voice came over the radio, cutting through the moment. This is air traffic command. No civilians are authorized to handle flight equipment. Stand down immediately. Rachel didn't blink. She turned a single dial and reactivated the long-defunct Echo Terrain Navigator, a backup system used only in combat-ready aircraft. The screen flickered to life with a grainy but accurate landscape map. You're using Echo? The captain asked. It's the only one not lying to you, Rachel replied. The co-pilot hesitated, then stepped aside. I'm signing off on her. Let her work. Rachel adjusted the yoke, her motions precise. Outside, the clouds parted slightly, revealing jagged peaks below. Inside the cabin, silence hung heavy. Back in row 9, her empty seat faced an onslaught of questions. A teenager leaned into the aisle. Yo, did she just get invited to the cockpit? Who is she? His friend shrugged. Military? Maybe. She had some code name, right? The woman with diamond earrings whispered sharply. She probably thinks she's special. These unstable types' delusions of grandeur. But then, a child cried out, Mommy, is she a superhero? Her mother, still pale, managed a thin smile. Maybe she is, baby. Another jolt shook the plane. But this one was different, controlled, calculated, like a hand guiding instead of resisting. And then, for the first time in 30 minutes, the plane leveled out. No more shuddering, no more gasps, just quiet. A young flight attendant opened the cockpit door slightly, her voice trembling. Passengers are asking who you are. Rachel didn't look up from the controls. Tell them to sit tight and buckle in. Back outside, the murmurs had changed. The man in the patched blazer, who'd sat silent the entire flight, finally stood and picked up the worn notebook Rachel left behind. He opened it carefully, eyes scanning the pages. These aren't doodles, he said aloud. These are flight logs, old ones, military grade. She's not just someone. He held it up for everyone to see. She's been through hell in the sky before, and she came back. The cabin went silent again. People looked at the seat where Rachel had been. The bag, the scars they hadn't noticed. The storm was still raging outside, but inside the plane, a new kind of stillness had taken hold, respect. The cockpit, though still humming with alarms and the low whine of redirected power, felt calm, a strange, eerie calm. Rachel's fingers danced across the dials, each movement precise and unhesitant. She adjusted altitude, initiated a partial system reset, and cross-referenced the weather patterns against her own mental map of the region. The pilot watched her, his hand still hovering near the controls, but he didn't interfere. He knew what he was seeing, and it frightened him more than the storm outside. "You trained at Nellis?" he asked, softly. Rachel didn't look up. For a while, he nodded, eyes still locked on the flickering radar screen. "You flew blackout missions. I've heard the stories." Night Viper 9 disappeared after Oregon. Rachel didn't respond. The co-pilot leaned in, whispering now. "That was you." Rachel's voice remained level. "Focus. We're not through yet." Outside, lightning forked in the distance, arcing like white veins across the sky. Below, the mountains loomed jagged, reaching like claws toward the belly of the aircraft. Rachel adjusted the descent angle. "Wind shear coming up on port side," she said. "Microburst in 3, 2, now." The plane jolted violently. The pilot gasped, reaching for the throttle, but Rachel was already compensating, tilting the nose, bleeding speed, adjusting the pitch like it was muscle memory. The jolt subsided. The plane leveled again. The co-pilot looked at her, stunned. "You've done this in combat." Rachel didn't answer, but the ghost of something flickered across her face, a memory, a loss. Back in the cabin, the mood was changing. The woman in the blazer, arms crossed tightly, muttered, "This is insane." Just because she looks calm doesn't mean she knows what she's doing. But her voice had lost its edge. It sounded less like judgment and more like denial. The older man with Rachel's notebook carefully closed it and handed it to the pink cardigan woman. "You wanted to know who she is," he said. "Read that, then tell me she doesn't belong." "Up there." The woman stared at the cover. The initials, RJL, and underneath, a faded stamp, classified, Level 3, clearance. She swallowed hard, in the row behind her. The man with the diamond-studded watch who'd mocked Rachel earlier shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Okay, so she flew before. Doesn't mean she still can." "She just stabilized the aircraft," said a college-age girl in a NASA hoodie. "That wasn't luck. That was training." A middle-aged woman who'd stayed quiet the whole flight now leaned forward. Her voice was soft, but it carried. She didn't ask to help. She was pulled in, and all she's done is keep us alive. The argument died there. The passengers fell, silent again, waiting. Inside the cockpit, the storm was reaching its crescendo. Rachel squinted through the windshield. "We're not going to make it to Narita. Not with this system failure. I'm putting her down in Hokkaido." The pilot's head snapped toward her. "That's a military airstrip. Not rated for commercial jets." Rachel gave a slight nod. "And it's the only one clear of turbulence and low enough to cut crosswind risk. Unless you have another plan." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The co-pilot checked the map. "We can make it just barely. But the systems..." Rachel didn't wait. "I'll handle the approach. You handle the landing gear manually. I'll call the tower myself." She grabbed the headset, switching to a frequency so old and buried. The radio hissed for a second before clearing. "This is Night Viper 9, requesting emergency descent to Hokkaido 3 Bravo. Repeat, NV9 requesting combat-coded clearance." Silence, then static, then a voice, gravelly male, familiar. "Rachel." Rachel's hand tightened on the headset. "Yeah, it's me. I need a runway. You're cleared. Welcome back, Ghost Girl." In the cabin, the intercom crackled. Rachel's voice came through, steady, calm, and clear. "This is Passenger 9A. We are diverting to a secure landing zone in Hokkaido. Estimated descent begins in 12 minutes. Please remain seated and belted. A beat. Then she added, "We've got this." The cabin was still. Then quietly, someone clapped, then another, and then the entire aircraft filled with cautious applause, not loud, not cheering, just a quiet recognition, belief, hope. Back in the cockpit, Rachel leaned forward, eyes scanning every flicker on the screen. The terrain shifted below, the green ridges of northern Japan rising through the mist. The captain's voice cracked. "How did we not know who you were?" Rachel didn't look at him, "Because I didn't want you to." He nodded slowly. "Thank you. Whatever happens next." "Thank you." Rachel's grip on the controls tightened. "Just land the plane." The descent began. Outside the windows, the storm clawed at the aircraft like it couldn't bear to let it go without a fight. But inside the cockpit, Rachel's hands moved with the confidence of someone who had flown through darker skies, toward worse outcomes, and somehow come back. Altitude 9,000. Drop angle good. Gear. She didn't finish the sentence. The co-pilot was already on it, nodding. The emergency manual gear switch clicked into place with a dull thunk. The captain, usually the one in control, now simply watched, equal parts astonished and grateful. In the cabin, passengers clutched their seats, eyes darting to windows, whispering prayers, or whispering her name, Rachel, Night Viper, 9A. The woman in the blazer leaned toward the older man who still held Rachel's notebook. "She trained for this," she asked quietly. "She lived for it," he answered. "And from the looks of it, maybe died for it once, too." Rachel's mind was in a tunnel, nothing but the readings, the feel of the yoke, and the thin thread of memory that guided her hands. Wind shear coming up in 5 seconds. Tilt nose, 3 degrees starboard, flaps adjusted. The co-pilot checked. She was right. Everything was where it should be, even when the sensors said it wasn't. Her instincts were outpacing the failing instruments. "Do you always fly like this?" he asked, half joking, half in awe. Rachel allowed a small, dry smile. "Only when it counts." The voice from the tower came again, crackling through the headset. "NV9 runway is lit. Crosswinds at minimal. You're cleared to descend. On visual, touchdown confirmed." Rachel exhaled. Not relief. Not yet. Just focus. The cabin lights dimmed. Slightly intentional this time, as the plane entered its final approach. Rachel's voice came over the intercom once more. "Final descent. Please remain calm. You're going to feel the drop." The pink cardigan woman whispered to her husband. She said, "You're going to feel it, not we're." "She's not afraid." Her husband didn't answer. His fingers were white on the armrest. The little girl with the teddy bear looked up at her mom. "She's bringing us down now." Her mother nodded, eyes glassy, double quotes, "Yes, baby. She's taking us home." Back in the cockpit, the runway lights pierced through the mist like a path drawn just for them. Rachel adjusted the descent again. A crosswind tugged at the plane's right wing. She corrected without flinching. "Altitude 4,500. Drop is steep but clean," she muttered. The co-pilot glanced at the pilot. "She's flying like she's memorized the topography." The captain just shook his head. "She probably has." Final approach. The runway rushed up toward them, wet from light rain, glistening under rows of landing lights. Rachel's eyes locked onto the end point. "Reverse thrust on my mark. Now." The plane kissed the ground. Soft. Then the tires grabbed with a squeal, skidding only slightly as the hydraulic brakes hissed to life. Rachel's hands held the yoke steady, even as the fuselage jolted under the strain. The aircraft slowed, and then stopped. Dead silence. Then the captain, his voice raw with disbelief, whispered, "Touchdown confirmed. We're on the ground." Cheers exploded in the cabin. Crying, clapping, laughter through tears. Some passengers rose to their feet. Others stayed seated, stunned, as if they weren't sure it was real. Cindy, the flight attendant, leaned into the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've landed safely at Hokkaido Bravo. Please remain seated." But her voice cracked at the end, and she turned away, wiping her eyes. Rachel stood up, her hands still and steady. The captain turned to her. "You saved 216 lives." Rachel looked at him. Her voice was quiet. Not the first time he started to speak, but Rachel had already turned, heading toward the cabin door. As she stepped out, the co-pilot caught her arm lightly. "They'll want to know who you are." Rachel paused. "They'll forget in a week. That's okay." He looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't. She walked back into the cabin. The same rows of judgmental faces that had once ridiculed her now parted like waves around her. Some stared, some whispered, some tried to speak and could, and single quotes too. The teenage boy with the earbuds just watched her walk by. The pink cardigan woman stood. "I was wrong," she said, voice shaking. Rachel didn't respond. The old man held out her notebook as she passed. "He left this." She took it, nodding. "Thank you." That was all. When the door opened and the staircase was rolled to the plane, the air outside was sharp and clean. Rachel descended alone. No cameras, no applause, just mist curling around the tarmac and the weight of what she'd done tucked quietly into the bag at her side. The airline would release a statement. The media would speculate. But by the time anyone figured out who she was, she'd be long gone. The Hokkaido tarmac glistened beneath Rachel's sneakers as she stepped onto the wet ground. Around her, the airport pulsed with emergency response crews, blinking lights, and the low hum of incoming dispatches. Paramedics, police, and ground control all converged toward the aircraft, expecting chaos but found calm. There were no injuries, no crash, no wreckage. Just 216 souls returned to Earth by a woman no one had expected to save them. Rachel kept walking, blending into the fog. No one stopped her. No one dared. Inside the terminal, a wall of media was already forming, paparazzi and reporters shouting over each other with lenses aimed toward the gate. But they were focused on the crew, the captain, the airline officials, the polished faces meant to own the narrative. Rachel slipped past them, unnoticed, her hoodie raised, her bag slung low, her pace unhurried. In a dim corner of the airport's underground garage, she found the quiet she needed. She leaned against a cold cement pillar, pulling out her notebook. Its pages were old, worn thin by time and weather. Her fingers ran over one in particular, coordinates, scribbled in a looping hand. Altitude numbers, a call sign .NV9. It was never just a code. It was her. It still was. Elsewhere in the terminal, chaos brewed. Airline PR officials scrambled to contain the story. Passengers were being gently herded away from reporters. The captain had already given a shaky interview, crediting an off-duty military advisor who had voluntarily assisted in an unprecedented situation. But the questions mounted. Who was she? Where did she go? Why wasn't she named? And then, the leaks began. One of the ground crew posted a photo, a grainy image of a woman in a hoodie exiting the aircraft alone. "She saved us," the caption read. "Nobody's saying her name." Within minutes, it spread. Somewhere in a Tokyo internet cafe, a freelance journalist named Corey scanned the flight logs from earlier that day. She wasn't covering the story, not officially, but the rumors intrigued her. A woman saved the flight. A military past vanished from the system. She tapped her keyboard and found a name buried in a redacted Air Force document from years ago. Rachel V. Callahan. Status discharged. No further details. Under remarks. Last seen, 2017. Oregon incident. Classified. Corey stared at the screen, breath-catching. If this was the same woman, this was no civilian miracle. This was buried history walking again, back in Oregon. A small repair garage sat quiet under a gray sky. Inside, the same oil-stained workbench, the same AM radio humming softly. Rachel stood over a carburetor, just like always, hands methodical. The TV in the corner played muted news coverage of the flight, the camera lingering on the co-pilot being interviewed. Words like miracle, mystery woman, and ghost pilot floated across the screen. Rachel didn't look up. The mechanic beside her, Frank, scratched his beard. "That you, they're talking about again." Rachel twisted a bolt, tight and clean. "Not officially." Frank chuckled. "They'll figure it out eventually." Rachel didn't answer. She wiped her hands, turned the wrench again. The world buzzed louder each day. Clips from the passengers. Phones hit every platform. One captured her walking into the cockpit. Another caught her voice over the intercom. A few had her silhouette as she touched the controls, the plane steadying beneath her hands. The internet called her many things: the passenger pilot, ghost of row 9A, the vanished ace, and most frequently, Night Viper 9. She was the #1 trend by the next week, and yet, no one could find her, because Rachel never wanted to be found. In a quiet suburb of Portland, an elderly woman watched the news as a blurry image of her daughter filled the screen. She pressed a trembling hand to her lips, tears brimming. "She's alive," she whispered. Beside her, a girl of 10 clutched a drawing Rachel in a plane, cape flapping, stars in the background. "Is that Auntie Rachel?" The woman nodded. Slowly, she saved people again. The girl beamed. "She's a real superhero." The woman wiped her eyes, heart aching. "No," she said softly. "She's more than that." The Pentagon noticed. 2 deep in a secure room, officials reviewed the incident. "She accessed cockpit controls without authorization," one said. "She stabilized a failing aircraft with outdated navigation systems," another replied. "Systems only taught to Tier 1 pilots." A general stepped forward, flipping a file closed. "She's back." "But she walked away from all this," someone else said. "Maybe," the general answered, "but she still walks toward the fire." In Tokyo, Corey stared at her screen. She had the coordinates from the flight. She had Rachel's old records. She had an idea. What she didn't have was Rachel's permission. And that's when she realized this wasn't a story to chase. This was a story to protect. She closed the file. Sometimes the world doesn't need to know everything. Sometimes heroes deserve to disappear. Rachel stood at the edge of the Pacific, the cold wind biting her cheeks, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Her phone buzzed once, an encrypted message, with only a line: NV9. "We remember Oregon, and we're grateful for Tokyo." She tucked the phone away, didn't respond, didn't need to. The sea crashed. Relentless and wild, she turned away from it and walked toward the life she chose. The quiet one, the one where she didn't need medals, or titles, or recognition. She needed only one thing: to be ready the next time a plane dropped out of the sky. And no one believed a woman in seat 9A could save them.